Good afternoon, everybody. Muliwandi Nzanga Malawi. My name is Natasha Maluza. I want to welcome Isobel Reid, representatives of the Mamie Martin Fund, Moira, Dunworth. And then we also have Elaine, who's in the room today as well, and Angie Wine, the co-convener. With this being said, this is the 60th year of Malawi's independence. We are very happy to have Colin Cameron in the house today as well, who is also a member of Malawi's first cabinet following the independence. As I said before, my name is Natasha Maluza. I am Malawian from Blantyre. I am the Communications and Engagement Officer here at the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, which is also known as the SNP. The SNP is a membership organization or network which exists to support, connect, and represent the many individuals and organizations in Scotland with dignified two-way links with Malawi. You are all welcome, especially to those as well that are online. I'd like to introduce David Bone today. He's the Secretary of the Livingstonia-Blantyre Fellowship. He's also the co-editor of the Society of Malawi Journal. However, before I hand over to David, just a few housekeeping rules. So today we have no fire drills planned, which is great. So we shouldn't be hearing any fire alarms at all. The camera is positioned right here, which is a device called the owl. And basically what the owl does, it dictates your voice. So when you speak, the camera will pick up from your voice as well. So you can stay seated during the Q&A section and the owl will follow your face or your sound of your voice. So the toilets are right outside the business center. So as you're walking through, they're right to your left, but if you're walking out, they're to your right. We have the disabled facilities and the normal toilets as well. And these are all gender neutral as well. The Wi-Fi is located right at the back. The Wi-Fi should be council public Wi-Fi and the password should be Edinburgh 2030. I will now hand over to David Bone.
Well, as we say in Malawi, all protocol observed. Thanks very much, for the introduction. Later in the programme, Klaus Fiedler, all the way from Zomba, the publisher and very distinguished church historian, is going to talk about the value of Isobel's book for the historiography of Malawi. Natasha herself will give a flavour of the book by reading us an extract from it, and Isobel will explain how it was that she came to choose her subject and how it was that she was able to put together 25 years ago the dissertation on which this present book is based. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and take up the story of how the dissertation got added to and was transformed into the book that is being launched today. When I was going to do a bit of research on it, I looked at the file and I saw, yes, there's 425 relevant emails. So I thought, no, we'll just wing it a bit. But it is evidence of the amount of painstaking research and effort that was taken to produce what I think is something of a polished gem of a book. Right, the process of the transformation, I think, started sometime after the annual general meeting of the Livingstonia-Blantyre Fellowship in 2001. That, if you don't know about the fellowship, it's mostly of missionaries and their families who've worked either in Malawi or in Zambia, in some cases both. And at that meeting, there had been talk of people's memories of mission life. Then, a bit after that, if my memory serves, Isobel rather diffidently, as is her way, asked if I would like to read a dissertation that she'd written on the subject. Now, as a Livingstonia mission kid myself, and my Isobel and myself having brought up our own children when we were missionaries, it caught me straight away. I was hooked. The title, The Myth and Reality of the Mission Family. I thought, yeah, there's a lot of us know a bit about that. Livingstonia Mission 21 to 28. Well, it's a generation after I was there with my parents, but it was interesting for me to see how much had changed in that time. As I started reading it, I was convinced that this was something that was not only very important history, but was a wonderful narrative, a wonderful story. Now, for reasons that Klaus Fiedler will explain, well, he'll tell you why it's such a good book in a historical sense. But what I liked about it was it described missionary life from the inside, and not the way it was packaged for the consumption of supporters back home. Now, when Isobel gives her presentation, she'll develop on that. And it talked about the missionaries' real preoccupations, apart from their dedication or sacrifice, which could not be doubted. They were very preoccupied with letters from home, how to get on with other missionaries, and battles, of course, with the Home Committee. So a lot of what I read resonated with the 50s and even the 70s. But I think, although it may be a good thing for missionaries and their kids, it's of a very general interest, as I think a read of the book will show. So, with Isobel's permission, I showed the dissertation to a number of people who were in a good position to judge its worth. Colin and Alison Cameron have had so much to do with the Mamie Martin Foundation, Klaus Fiedler, editor-in-chief of Missouri Press, and Dr. Gift Kaira, head of history at the University of Malawi, and this is one of his specialist fields. Now, everybody agreed that this was something that should be more widely known. Klaus said that Missouri Press would publish it, as I thought he would, but he gave fairly firm instructions. It should be given only the most minimal changes, no additions, publish it for what it is. It's a monograph, it's a 25-year-old dissertation. So he was happy with that. Well, Isobel being Isobel, this is not what happened. Never, if you know her, you'll not be surprised to hear that she never does anything by halves. So she went over all her original sources and then decided that she really needed to find out more about the background of the story. So, as well as the published material, the classics like John McCracken stuff, she joined the National Library of Scotland to get access to mission archives. She was there so often with Sandy, I'm told that there was actually talk of charging them rent. However, the result of all her delving was not only a deepening and sharpening of the original, but a complete new and valuable chapter and an appendix. I think this is one of the things that Klaus really likes about it. It's about all the missionaries and mission wives of Livingstonia Mission from the start with Mrs. Laws in 1879 up till 1926, complete at Klaus's request, because he had now changed his tune and he wanted more, complete with biographical details and with photographs of many of the people, which I think if you read it, but you'll agree, it actually brings to life people who would otherwise just be words on a page. Trying to all these emails, the actual process of getting the text and the pictures and the captions just right, and making the multiple corrections that the fifth reading turned up, it bears testament to the meticulous work of Isobel, Sandy, and Pat Dryden, who helped with the proofreading, and to the seemingly infinite patience of Klaus Fiedler. As I say, we've got a gem as a result. Finally, though, as everybody involved with publishing will know, getting a book printed is a job only half done. Now, in Malawi, I started with a bit of what I thought called judicious product placement, giving it to this head of department, that library, in the hope that it would become widely known and perhaps would be ordered as a course textbook. But that's the situation in Malawi. Isobel, Klaus, and I are so grateful to Moira and the Mamie Martin people and the Scotland-Malawi Partnership for all their work in setting up this launch. Now, I've been at several of these occasions, and to my knowledge, well, it's the first time that it's had to be shifted to a larger venue. Don't need a bigger boat, indeed. A question of how the book can be accessed. Your best option is buy a copy here today, because they're in very limited supply. When Klaus and Isabel and I were wondering how many copies, we went for a fairly conservative 150, which is, not bad, because we just didn't know how it would go. If with hindsight, we'd have got a lot more, and now we're thinking about where can we get them reprinted. So there are, I think, 40 books perhaps here today, some of them spoken for. There's another 15 coming next week. I only had a limited amount of space in my suitcase, and the friends are bringing 15 more. So if you don't get your book today, I'm sure Moira will take an order for it. They're also available, though more expensively, through the ABC, African Books Collective, though today at a price. In Malawi, for those online who may be in Malawi, the places they are now available are Mutipoya's Chambo Market and Maneno Bookshop in Lilongwe. And Klaus Fiedler says that they should also be available at Kacheri Bookshop in Zomba, Mzuri Press in Mzuzu, and at La Caverna at Top Mandala in Blantyre. Now my voice is given out, so I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Moira from the Mamie Martin Fund. Before we move on, one of the things we're hoping is we're going to have Klaus Fiedler speaking to us online, but just while we see if he's there, no, not yet. That's fine, I have his speech. If not, I have so many speeches that I could just stand up here and run this thing. But in the meantime, Colin.
Yes. Can you hear me? This is Klaus Fiedler speaking.
Oh, that's lovely, Klaus. Can we come back to you in just a moment, please?
Yes.
Great stuff. Can I invite Colin Cameron? Colin wanted to say a few words to bring greetings. You can speak from there, Colin, because I think the owl should pick up your voice. Is that correct, Natasha?
All right.
Yeah, it should be fine just to speak from there.
The reason I'm wanting to say a few words is on behalf of Alison.
Are we second now? We just check that we have sound wise this is working okay. Stuart is doing something highly technical with a biro. Technology at its finest here. Okay, so this is Colin Cameron. There's a long history with Malawi.
Thank you. The reason I'm saying a few words, not because I want to be making any speeches, is on behalf of Alison. Alison was patron since the Mamie Martin Fund was started and found it a very worthwhile and interesting position to hold. And I think on more than one occasion, it was instrumental in reasonably substantial funds coming and support from the Scottish Government. Unfortunately, we are in our 90s now, and it is not suitable for Alison to travel. And therefore, on her behalf, we thank Moira for all she's done. We wish the Mamie Martin Fund every success. And as I mentioned to David, there is coming along here again with all the folk who are interested in Malawi. That has whetted our appetite again for Malawi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. And on behalf of the Mamie Martin Fund, we are indebted to Alison. We have two patrons. Well, we had two patrons, a Scottish patron and a Malawi patron. Mrs. Vera Chirwa is our Malawi patron, and Alison has been our Scottish patron from our inception in 1993 until last year when she stepped down. And just what Colin said, really, it was great. She was a real asset and support to us, not to mention she and Colin were instrumental in us getting quite a lot of Scottish Government funding, through which we supported 45 girls all the way through school with that funding. So that was no small thing. And thank you so much for Colin and Alison live in Irvine. And thank you so much for making the journey over here today. We're truly honoured to have your company.
Thank you.
So now we can move on. We're delighted to have Klaus Fiedler with us from Malawi. And Klaus, if you could possibly switch on your camera when you're speaking, that would be really helpful.
I switched it on and I unmuted. Can you hear or see me?
Yes.
Okay. So both positive.
Yes.
And I should start now.
Yes, please.
Okay. Since 1859, Scotland and Malawi have been in the talking place. And as a native German, I'm happy to be part of that conversation, representing Zuni Press, the publisher. As a tiny university press in a small country, we are standing in a long tradition of research and scholarship, since the days when the Arabs conserved the Greek learning and later made it accessible to Western Europe in Spain and Sicily. And we do not feel intimidated by our big sisters in Oxford, Cambridge, and in Edinburgh, but we feel encouraged. We are so grateful here that for all the learning we got from Scotland and the rest of Europe, and all the books published there. And we feel that we are now obliged to make our own contribution. And if it is a small contribution for the world, it may be bigger for Malawi. As Zuni Press, we are not only committed to publish our knowledge, new knowledge based on solid research, but we are also committed to advance the academic discourse in our chosen fields by filling gaps that exist and setting the record straight where required. When Kachere series published the second edition of John McCracken's seminal History of Livingstonia Mission, 1875 to 1940, he pointed out in his foreword, a very thoughtful one, that if he had the chance to rewrite the book, he would pay much more attention to the contribution of the women, both Scots and Malawians, the silent majority in much of this book. The first attempt to set the record straight was that Margaret Sinclair published Salt and Light, the book here in my hands, from the letters and diaries of her mother, Mamie Martin, as a book in the Kachere series, the mother of Zuni Press. I'm very happy that Isobel Reid now has moved the discourse to the monograph level, extending the discussion from one missionary family to other missionary families in the same Livingstonia mission. A special asset of the book is that Isobel Reid extended her discussion to all the female missionaries in Livingstonia, even presenting a complete list up to 1927. I appreciate such thorough research forward based on the facts and avoiding all ideological overload, which is so common. Zuni Press and its daughter Luviri Press has no formal publishing program, but both publishers make much effort to set the record straight on the role of women in the history of the church in Malawi, both in its missionary component and in its local component. And this book is moving the cause forward. All good research opens the vision for more. And here I want to propose that someone should do here in Malawi a historical study of the Balalakazi at Loudon Mission in Mbangweni, who were the women elders 30 years before they were allowed to be called so. And if someone wants to pick up the challenge in Scotland, a study of Agnes Fraser, a fully qualified medical doctor, appointed only as a male missionary's wife, would be a good device to set the record straight and to get her out of the shadows of her famous husband, Donald. I wish the book and its message a widespread, and that it be a seed for more. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Fiedler. We're very honoured to have you with us, and thank you for overcoming all your technological fears and obstacles in the absence of your wife, who I gather doubles up as your IT assistant. So moving forward, I would like to invite Natasha to read an excerpt from this amazing book on behalf of Isobel, who would like for Natasha to do that for her.
In the popular imagination, missionaries, like saints, seem to be imbued with a pious virginity of temperament that gazes heavenward, detached from baser responses of passionate anger or petty jealousies. The cache of letters from Malawi that forms the basis of this discussion challenges this myth of missionaries, particularly missionary women, as plaster saints. The letters demonstrate that African Christians and Scottish missionaries, whether male or female, are of like passions and are enriched and humbled by each other's life experience. At a more prosaic level of the letters provide a case study of one married couple's response to chronic stress associated with climatic conditions, professional conflict in the missionary environment, and the cross-cultural tensions. Although we shall view the couple as in one sense of one flesh, our chief interest lies herein with the wife. A wider, though not exhaustive, history and analysis of the Livingstonia mission agents up to the mid-1920s has been included as an addendum in an attempt to create backdrop and counterfoil for the Martin account, while continuing focus on the experience and contribution of women. The case for mission in terms of the heroic sacrifice and evangelistic achievement of individual men and an occasional woman is substituted in this work by an attempt to show the humanity of the couple, particularly of the wife. It begs the question, what is ultimately the nature of missionary enterprise?
Thank you very much, Tash. That's very good. Thank you. Now, we wanted to do a presentation about the book, and Isobel decided that, I perhaps use the word decided there loosely. We decided that we would record that presentation for different reasons. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you this 10-minute presentation about the book, presentation by Isobel about the book. And then there will be a time then for comments and questions to Isobel afterwards. Democracy, Isobel.
How would I characterize this book? Perhaps it might be described as the firstborn of the parent book, Salt and Light by Margaret Sinclair, published in Malawi in 2003. Myth and reality of the missionary family stands in an academic continuum, published over a century and a half, mostly by men. This is different in that it is by a woman, about women. More correctly, it is about women and men together, working and sometimes suffering toward a common purpose. The continuing introduction of Christianity to a people who are quite evidently a loved and respected people. There is an appended chapter outlining the history of the mission from 1875, its foundation year, by the Free Church of Scotland, up to 1924 and the formation of the CCAP, that is, the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian, ending around the end of the second decade of the 20th century. There is further appended a list of all the female agents, wives and single women who served over more than 50 years, some 78 in total. It's not the first time that missionary women's voices have been heard. Nevertheless, the revelation of interpersonal difficulties between mission staff, men as well as women, reveals the humanity, the vulnerability, and thus the relatability of the characters. The unique aspect is the origin of the source material. As I've said, letters by Mamie and Jack Martin, which span the 1920s, that is, the immediate post-First World War years. How did the book come about? Having spent some years, that is 1978 to 83, my husband Sandy and I, took our children back to Malawi to visit old friends and allow the children to set their childhood in context. I was initially alerted at this time to the lack of information on women missionaries by Professor Klaus Fiedler of Mizuni Press, who has now published this book, as well as Martin Sinclair's Salt and Light in 2003. In '96, having returned home, consultation with Professor Andrew Ross and Dr. Jack Thompson resulted in me embarking upon a Master's Theology degree, the dissertation of which ultimately became the kernel of Myth and Reality of the Missionary Family. Professor Kenneth, and in particular Mrs. Hester Ross, also had a crucial hand in all of this. The crux person, of course, was Margaret Sinclair, who gave me access to all of her parents' letters, as well as ultimately giving the dissertation her blessing. Extra family photographs were kindly supplied by the Sinclair family to augment those of the National Library of Scotland and the University of Stirling archive. There was no intention to make this research public until the dissertation was read by one Mr. David Bone, who, I am convinced, if I believed in such things, was a border collie sheepdog in a previous incarnation. Corralling and penning became inescapable. So what have I learned? I saw the essential contribution of women missionaries to the evangelizing process, albeit hitherto inadvertently veiled in a cloak of relative invisibility. The impact of the First World War revealed what was then a scarcely emergent consciousness in the minds of the male hierarchy, as in the minds of missionary women and Malawian women alike, the imperative need for intellectual and thus professional development of local women. I was shocked to discover the legal intellectual subordination of women in Scotland and Britain by universities up to the 1890s. My research revealed many gut-wrenching, heartbreaking family and individual stories, some of which I glanced away from respectfully. The overall inspirational revelation was the profound faith and courage of women and men alike. My memory was drawn to that wonderful First World War poem by Thomas Hardy, Men Who March Away, the soldier's song. What of the faith and fire within us, men who march away, leaving all that here can win us? What of the faith and fire within us, men who march away? Faith and courage are not gender specific, far from it. I have been honoured to give but an outline of a magnificent, awe-inspiring story worthy of more research. The research has been a keyhole into a largely neglected area of Scottish women's history. Similarly, it reveals an emergent area of Malawian women's history. I have learned that there is important research to be done into the lives and experiences of missionary children and their mothers. I hope this book may stimulate academic interest in this and other missionary-related topics. Lastly, with the launch of this book, I realise that I have revealed what is, in truth, the Scotland-Malawi partnership in embryo, as yet largely unrecognised. In conclusion, some individuals may weep reading this account. I wept in places at what I found. It feels like sacred ground. Perhaps the missionary enterprise might be summarised in the words of the Reverend Dr. Donald Fraser. Long after a European has begun to speak in some fashion the language of the people, a very articulate sermon is being preached by the things he does and by the kind of man he is. This, in essence, was Mamie Martin. I hope that the proceeds from Myth and Reality of the Missionary Family may be used by the Mamie Martin Fund for the promotion of female education in northern Malawi, the fulfillment of Mamie's dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Isobel for her patience in making that recording. If any of you have made videos, you know that it doesn't take 10 minutes. And she was super patient. Thank you for that. So now we would like to invite you to ask, to make any comments to Isobel or to ask any questions, and Isobel is going to come and join me up here. It's good, just feeling clear of that. Lovely. Yeah. And if you would identify yourself before you speak, that would be very helpful. We welcome, of course, all of the people who are joining us online, including the other co-convener of the Mamie Martin Fund, Alan. I see Alan Leverett is online, and Mercy Sibande, our country director. really day by day carrying on the work of Mamie Martin. That woman is the embodiment of Mamie Martin in modern day life, and she's online, and welcome particularly to Mercy.
You're very welcome. It's amazing to see you and everyone online.
So we have questions, Sue. And if the microphone is coming. Thank you. Well, can you say who you are, Sue, please? Say your name, yeah, because I can see your name because I can see it on the label.
Sue Patterson.
Sue Patterson, thank you.
Isobel, you have inspired me to actually read Mamie's letters. I bought the book when it was first published, and I haven't read it yet until I started 3 days ago, and I've been speed reading it since. And I moved to tears by it. It's probably the most moving account I've read for a very long time, and it's true. Thank you for getting me off my backside to read something really important, and I thank you for your work in following it up.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mitch, you'll let us know if anybody online, yeah, gives a shout. Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Finlay. This is a subject that I think is really interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading the book, Isobel. However, you know, there is so much more, as you say, that needs to be said. Over the years that I've worked with the Church of Scotland, there's been many things about women on the mission field that have touched me in a way that I think need to be explored, and some of not just myths, but the realities of what was there, just highlighted in a way that perhaps we don't. We all know that our friend Anne Hepburn used to say that she was an asterisk beside her husband's name in the Church of Scotland records, and I'm sure there's a few other asterisks sitting, sitting here, like David's mum Betty and others. But it's not just in the 20s that these things should be explored, and not just in Malawi. You know, who are the women missionaries that we know? We know Mary Slessor's name. We know Jane Hanning's name, for example. And why do we know them? Because of what happened to them in particular, but neither of them wanted to be a hero, as would have Mamie Martin or Mrs. Bone or others, and people right up to nowadays. It's not just in the 20s, but right up till nowadays. I'm sitting next to someone who worked in Malawi for 23 years. She's not from mission, she's not a missionary kid or missionary family, and she's not an asterisk, she's a person in her own right. You know, and there are others as well that we don't hear, you know, about all the heroes that were there in Malawi over the years and in other parts of the world. And I do think the women's place in the missionary movement is something that hasn't really been explored, and there is a lot more that could be explored. There was one other thing I was going, I was just going to tell you about a story when I was in Malawi, and it was in 2000 when the celebrations of the 125 years of the CCAP, this Livingstonia-Blantyre Synod. And we were busy preparing for the celebrations, and I was on one of the endless committees that are there. And so I was on the committee that was producing all the things like the cloth and the teapots and things like that. And it was great fun. But when I went to the committee, they said to me, you can speak at this committee, Carol, because we're going to make you an honorary man. Now, let me tell you, I had an answer to that, but you know, that was in 2000, and so I think, you know, you have lit a touch paper here, but there's a lot more that could be explored here. And you never know what I might do when I retire, but
Yeah.
probably not. But yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Carol, but we have taken note, so you said it in public now.
Well,
And
I
yes,
do have one question. I know David mentioned it earlier, but I've got a question if you're lucky to do online here asking if it's readily available in Malawian bookshops.
now, so David, Stuart, if we could have the microphone back to David here. So you were sneaking away with the microphone there. Multitasking, he's
Yeah,
trying to multitask.
I have to say that in Malawi, people very much like being given books are not terribly great at buying them. And this is from Malawians themselves have said this. No, the answer is that the wonderful people who do want to buy books in Malawi, there are two places I know have them, both of them in Lilongwe. There's Moti Poya's Chambo Market and there's the Maneno bookshop. Klaus and I have spoken about where the rest of the copies aren't they? They're still with the printer, but he promises that they'll be sent to La Caverna in Blantyre. They'll be available from Kachere bookshop in Zomba, if you can find it, and in Mzuli itself in Mzuzu. So as far as I know, those are the only places. But distribution in Malawi is a problem.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, David. And the book is available here, but also through the Mamie Martin website, mamiemartin.org, because Isobel has very kindly gifted all of the books in Scotland to the Mamie Martin Fund for fundraising for all of the proceeds. So your full purchase price goes to our work with educating girls in Malawi. Now, that's currently out of stock because we felt it would be a tad embarrassing to come to a book launch with no books to sell. So we made that out of stock just a few days ago. And well, we have started a waiting list for the books. There are some here to buy, but if you're not lucky enough to do that, we have a waiting list here, or you can email the Mamie Martin Fund and we'll let you know as soon as we have access to some more copies, which we hope will be soon. And as David said earlier, you know, we're working on future stock. So thank you very much for that, David, and thanks to Lucky for the question from Malawi. So any other comments or questions? Yes.
Colin Cameron.
Just to say, you made a phrase there, Isobel, which goes with every bit of research that there is, and that is for the research needed. I have to say, with my own experience, which comes much later from the dates you're writing about, the problem is still there for the position of women. And I particularly think, although I was never a mission wife, I do recall when I got married, and I did not tell the Church of Scotland I was getting married in Malawi. And word came back when they did hear through a colleague that they don't employ married women. Carol, you mentioned Mrs. Hepburn and her asterisk. That was exactly the case when I went out there. Also, when I was with John in Uganda, it was with Lutheran World Service, and they put out a survey form about why they had attrition of staff. Not a thing about wives or the children involved. And I wrote them a long letter to tell them that they're just as likely to move on because of the wife not feeling fulfilled or being ignored, or what I have seen in Malawi is missionary wives who have been lost completely in the shadow of their husbands.
Yeah.
The children all going away to boarding school, the husband working late hours, either in his work that he was called to do or other work of repairing, and the wife neither saw her husband nor her children. There's a huge gap there for the place of children of missionaries and missionary families.
That was Helen Kerr. She didn't identify herself.
No, she did, we just.
Oh, did you? I
necessarily
didn't
pick up
hear
on-
it.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, you did, that was Helen here.
Yeah.
And David,
I'm fortunately able to give a message of hope about women in Malawi. Just today we said cheerio to Eunice Mbia, who's going down to London to research and come back to Edinburgh to research into the influence of the Scottish missionaries on the Malawian political system. Very strong woman. Watch this space. The new editor-in-chief of the Kacheri series, who is going to revive it big time, is a lady called Dorothy Temple. And she is formidable and strong. Comfort Mtota of the archive service is another one. Chisobo Kalinga, who works here in Edinburgh in the Department of Social Anthropology. These are youngish, well, to me, everybody's youngish, strong women who are going to make their voice, who are making their voices heard, and you'll hear a lot more of them. So this is a thing within Malawi. However, on the negative side, Isobel Reid, who many of you may know, she and some 3, I think, lady professors were at the funeral of King Speary, again, who many people would know. And all the male, this is 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, all the male professors were introduced and the female professors weren't. So, actually, that was not the person to do that to, actually, but it did happen. So there is hope, but there's still much to do. Thank you.
thank you very much, David, and Colin.
Neither Alistair and I were missionaries. We were members of the church.
Can you move that closer to your mouth, Colin? Thank you.
And what I'm saying is what happened to us during the emergency and how the women, particularly the wives of the missionaries, reacted to what was going on. And what both Alice and I, but particularly Alison, noticed, she was up in the mission with going out with the children and the other wives. There developed 2 groups of missionaries' wives who had very different views, who took very different actions in the light of their friends being arrested, in the light of politics getting involved, and etc., etc. Now, that was a situation we found, and I noticed it very clearly. This has never been looked at deeply, but it existed. Alison and I took action in the only way that we thought, because we thought this was improper. There's something wrong here. And we lived in Kabula Hill, not on the mission, and we deliberately invited the missionaries of both groups separately, sometimes together, in an effort so we could sit down, discuss, because we had views as well, and try and find some common ground or find some explanation as to why this lady and that lady would barely speak to one another, missionaries, wives, during the emergency, because of the situation they were all had to face up. I didn't say that one was successful.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I now ask Isobel to perhaps make some concluding remarks?
Well, it is amazing to be here. It is so wonderful to see so many friends and people I have met present, and all those people online. And I would just like to mention that by a miracle, we have 2 Hungarian scholars present. So, Istvan and Abraham, it is unbelievable that you're here. So we are at New College together, and we have really had a lot of fun together. Is there anything further for me to say? There's one important thing to say. In David Bone's speech, as you noticed, the dog, sort of collie dog aspect. But you know, one of his skills, which I hadn't realized before, he's quite good at embroidery. He's quite good at embroidery, so you know. And the other important thing to say, the Irish Republic has very good sheepdogs too. This amazing team of people. Thanks, Tash, Mitch, Stuart, Dorothea, who isn't here, and lots of people who are unseen. It's amazing that all of these people have been working and succeeding in making this afternoon what it is. And of course, particularly to Klaus. Without Klaus, it wouldn't have happened at all. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.
Your microphone for Carol.
Just something very short. It's important. Yeah, very short. I suppose this is to the Scotland-Malawi partnership, but one of the things that really bothers me at the moment is that how do we archive what is happening today? You know, in 100 years' time, if we went to the National Library of Scotland, we're not going to find the same sort of archives to look through, to do research like this as we have at the moment. So how do we archive it? And that's a question for you to take away, because it's, and we're struggling with that at the Church of Scotland, but I think it is a real issue.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Carol, thank you. Okay, so moving to a close, we had hoped that a member of the Martin family would be here to comment on the book and to thank Isobel. That's not possible because of illness, what a lot of illness there is around. But just this morning, they had both Willie and Aileen who were going to come down from Angus had to call off because of illness. So I'm going to read Willie's remarks for him. Willie is Mamie Martin's grandson. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say what I think, what I believe my mother, Margaret Sinclair, would have said about this book if she'd still been around today. When Isobel was writing her dissertation some years ago, Margaret had aided and abetted her, so the publication of Myth and Reality of the Missionary Family would have pleased Mum greatly. I think she would be delighted that what Isobel has done with Jack and Mamie Martin's letters is to pass the massive amount of information in the letters through an objective, academically rigorous filter, and then follow where the evidence led, as Hercule Poirot would say. As a result, we get to read a fascinating account of a sparsely documented part of the recent history of Malawi, Scotland, and dare I say it, the British Empire. The First World War, the Kaiser's War, as my grandpa Jack called it, was a massive part of the lives of Jack and Mamie, and everyone else, of course. But the timeline of this book starts long before 1914, and I found that just as interesting as reading about members of my family. Margaret's deep interest in all things historical would have been piqued. This is the first published use of the letters that isn't driven by DNA. He means isn't family originated, at least as far as we know. And that was one of the things that motivated my mother. There's information in there that would be useful in the broadest sense to someone sometime out with the family. So partly for posterity, she laboriously transcribed all the letters onto her Amstrad word processor. Margaret Sinclair, my mother, would be hugely relieved to know that the letters weren't going to have to be responsible. Sorry, let me just read that sentence again. Margaret Sinclair, my mother, would be hugely relieved to know that the family wasn't going to have to be responsible for shedding light on those letters. Thank you very, very much, Isobel, for getting that ball rolling and setting the letters off on their own journey. We Sinclair siblings, my sisters Marriott and Janet and I, wish you all the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you all for taking part in this insightful book launch today with Isobel. Thank you, Mamie Martin Fund, for putting the event together in a short period of time. Isobel will be signing some books and taking orders right after this. And also, I'll take this opportunity to let you all know that if you're not an SMP member, we welcome you to join, and we also encourage you to actually join. The membership fees membership fees allow the SMP to conduct many activities. A link for the membership sign up will be on our webpage, and I'll put it in the chat box shortly as well for our online attendees. We do have a number of upcoming Malawi at 60 events that are coming up. So I will also put this link on our chat box, and it will also be on our website. So you can always check at any time. We update that every time we have an event coming up. And Zikomo, thank you for coming.